Hi everybody, my name is Lindsey Bordner. I'm a violinist. I freelance here in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, and I teach violin and viola lessons. I'm also a string advisor for the Paul A. Schmitt Violin Shop. Today in this video, we're going to talk about how to tune your string instrument. So this video is geared towards students who have not quite yet mastered tuning their own instrument, and for parents who may be helping their child tune their instrument at home, maybe in the absence of a teacher. So first of all, I'm going to walk you through a few terms that I may use in this video in case they're unfamiliar to you. So first of all, the terms sharp and flat. Sharp just means it's a little bit high, and flat means it's low. So if we want the pitch A, and instead of sounding like this, if it's a little higher like this, we would call that sharp, and we need to bring the pitch back down. So the next thing I'm going to talk about in terms of terms that I'll use is fine tuners and pegs. So most student instruments have 4 fine tuners, and those are these down here, the little screws that you can use to raise the pitch of the string or lower the pitch. And then pegs are these bigger kind of turny things in the top that go into the peg box of the instrument. And for both of those, there are general rules to know. When you're going to tune a string, you want to identify which peg or fine tuner connects to the string that you need to tune. For the pegs, if you need to tune the string higher, you want to turn the peg away from you, so the top goes away. That is if you're sitting with the instrument in your lap with the strings towards you. And if you need to lower a peg, then you would turn that string towards you, or turn the peg towards you. Then with the fine tuners, the only rule to know is righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So if you turn to the right, that's going to tighten the fine tuner and tighten the string. And tightening the string makes the pitch go up, so that'll make it go sharp. Or if it's flat, that will help fix the problem. If you go to the left with these fine tuners, that'll loosen the string, which will make the pitch go down, makes the pitch go flat, which is what we want if the string is too sharp. I am going to be demonstrating on violin and viola today. I don't have a cello and a bass, but pretty much all of these concepts they can apply to all string instruments, or at least all bowed string instruments, I'll say. Okay, so there are several methods we can use to tune an instrument. Professionals will just use their ears. We usually get an A. If we play in an orchestra, the oboe or someone will play an A, and then we tune our A just by listening to that A, and then we tune all the other strings based on what we tuned the A to. And I'll walk through that method a little bit later. But a lot of students like to use either apps or tuners to tune, and I think those are really helpful and handy until you get the hang of really just tuning by ear. So one thing that a lot of students use is a little clip-on tuner like this. It can clip to the side of your instrument, and then you turn it on, and then it'll tell you whether you're in tune or not. So I don't know if you can see that, but those are really handy. And also apps. I can put a link to some helpful apps in the description of this video. If any of you have apps that you like to use for tuning, or other tuning devices or tips or tricks, feel free to share them also in the comments. Okay, so the first thing that we need to know when tuning an instrument, no matter which method you're using, whether it's an app or just tuning by ear or a tuner, we still need to know what the pitches should be. So on the violin, that's going to be E, A, D, and G. Now I'm going from high to low, so that's going to be, if you're looking at the instrument, the high end is on the right side and the low end is on the left side. That's on any string instrument. Okay, on the viola, the pitches we're going to tune to are A, D, G, and C. Now on the cello, it's the same pitches as the viola, except an octave lower. So everything will sound lower, but it's still A, D, G, and C. Double bass, I'll just briefly touch on this since I think there won't be as many of you. Double bass is from high to low, G, D, A, E. But one kind of useful trick for hearing those intervals, we call this interval between strings. On the violin, viola, and cello, that interval is called a fifth. So it's a perfect fifth is what we call it in music. And the reason is because it's 5 notes between those two pitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so it brings you up to the next string pitch. So between these two pitches, or these two strings, which are G and D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So basically on violin, viola, and cello, if you're pretty sure one pitch is in tune, you can sing the first 5 notes of a major scale, and you will arrive at what should be the next string up. You can also do this going down. So from A to D, if your A is in tune but you need to tune the D, then you can count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and there's that pitch. But for the bass, we're tuning in fourths, and so that means from, let's say we're tuning from D to G, we would go 1, 2, 3, 4. That would bring you from D to G. So the spacing is smaller between the strings on a double bass than it is on the 3 upper string instruments. Before I get into demonstrating, there are 2 things you can do. If you are a student and you know how to use the bow already, you can bow the strings together or one at a time to hear them. If you are not to where you're using the bow yet, or if you're a parent helping out, it's also just fine to pluck the strings to hear them. So this one is not in tune. I'm about to tune it, but either plucking or bowing is fine. Then there's something else to know before we get started. When do we use the fine tuners and when do we use the pegs? So in general, the pegs make bigger adjustments, so we only use these if we need to make a big change, if a string is really out of tune. But we use the fine tuners when it's just slightly out of tune and we don't need to change it very much. So I'm going to start with my A here. And just for reference, I'm going to play you an A from, here's how I usually tune at home when I'm practicing. I just have this old metronome tuner. It only plays an A, no other pitches, but that's what my A should sound like. So you may be able to tell already, but this A is fairly sharp. And my little tuner device here is also telling me that it's sharp. So I'm gonna use the fine tuners here. So lefty loosey until it's at where it should be. Okay, and it says it's in tune there. So I can even double check and show you with this A. And now they do match. Okay. So maybe to show you the plucking way, or as we call it in string playing, pizzicato, I'm going to tune the D string that way. So we have our A in tune. Now we need the D string to be in tune with the A. Actually, this D sounds pretty in tune, so I think I'll leave it there. But now the D is in tune, so we need to tune the G. And that's pretty out of tune. So here for this one, maybe I'll use an app to show you. So I downloaded one that's pretty simple to use, and it's called Violin Tuner. I literally searched for violin tuner, and this was one of the first ones that popped up, and it's pretty simple. It looks like this, and you can play a pitch, and it's saying it's too low. It tells me right here at the bottom what the 4 pitches should be. So E, A, D, G. I'm actually going to click on G first, because that's the string that I'm trying to tune next. And this app has lots of ads. That's the only downside. So it played the tone of a G for me briefly, and then I have to click cancel on an ad. X out of that. Okay, now it's showing me this. So if I pluck my G, put this over here, whoop, there we go. It's telling me that my G is too low. Okay, so it flashed in tune for a bit, but I'm going to look at this while turning my G fine tuner. And remember, I'm going to the right because it's low, so I need to make it tighter. So righty tighty. And now it has stopped on in tune. So actually it's showing too high. But while I'm playing, it shows in tune, which is what we want. Okay? Next, the only string I have left to tune is the E string. And I'm going to talk about tuning by ear a little bit here. So for tuning by ear, one thing that you can do is, if you can't tell if it's sharp or flat, there's really no harm in just turning the fine tuner a little bit to see if it gets better or worse. You might be able to tell it doesn't sound great, but you might not know if it's sharp or flat. So this is a good way to figure that out. So it just doesn't sound great. So I'll turn it one way and see if it gets better or worse. And that actually got worse. So I'll go the other way now. And I've stopped there where it sounds better. Okay? So there are basically those 3 options for tuning. It's using a tuner device, a little digital tuner like this, using a phone app or something, and using your ears. So another great thing is if you find a phone app that will play a pitch more sustained for you, kind of like what my old style metronome tuner does, where you can just hear an A for a really long time and tune to that. That's a really good feature to have in a phone app or a tablet app. Okay? So next I'm going to get my viola, and this is mostly in tune. But I'm going to talk about a couple of things with the pegs. So first, we never want to over tighten a string, and this is really important. Maybe I should have said this first thing in the video, but with tuning, if we over tighten a string, then we risk breaking the string. So that's why it's so important to never over tighten it. It's probably not going to happen that we would ever over tighten using the fine tuners, but using the pegs, that can happen. So if I'm going to tune with a peg, the pegs just are very simple devices that just use tension to stay where they are. So I would first loosen the peg, which is turning it towards me. So let's say my A needs to be tuned, or actually I'll use D. So D, I'm going to retune it by turning it looser towards me. So now the pitch went way down, and from here I can use any of the methods that I spoke about earlier. Right now I'll just do it by ear. And if you go past it, just go back down again and go up and down and up and down until you can settle on the pitch. As you're tuning with pegs, it's good to have a finger on the other side of the scroll so that as you're turning, you can be pushing in with the peg to keep the tension there so that it won't slip as soon as you're done. So when I'm tuning like this, if I'm tuning D, as you can see, I have my index finger hooked around the other side of the scroll here. Or if I'm tuning one of the pegs that's on the other side, I put my pinky or even two fingers around on the other side of the scroll. That's going to help me be able to push the peg in as I'm turning it, especially as I get really close to where it needs to be. Now, you may encounter that sometimes a string, when you have opened your case, may be completely slack like this. I'm just doing this to demonstrate. This can happen all the time, don't worry. It doesn't mean that the string is broken or anything, most likely. So to tune that up, we're going to need to use the peg because the fine tuner won't do enough to fix this. So I'm going to use the peg, but something that's really important to watch for is making sure that it stays in its own little string groove over the bridge. We don't want it to go over here or over here and kind of carve its new little groove, because that'll happen. Same thing up here, where it crosses the nut, which is this part right here, elevating the strings a bit. Make sure that it's going into its own little groove. So I'm going to just tighten the peg here until it's not completely slack anymore. And then you can use any of the aforementioned methods. So you're going to need to still use the peg to get it in the ballpark of where the C should be. And then you can use the fine tuner to make any small adjustments after that, which is why they're called fine tuners. Oh, here's an example of a slippery peg. So I'm going to have to be extra careful to push it in there. And now I'll double check with my bow. There's an in-tune viola. So if you guys have any questions about anything I've said or anything I didn't cover today, please leave a comment or any questions. Again, as I said earlier, if you have any tuning apps that you really like or other suggestions, feel free to leave comments with those too. I hope this helped, and happy tuning and practicing at home.